So a little bit of background on Davis. Davis graduated from Brigham Young University remind me your undergrad, sorry.
International Studies.
International Studies. He went on to the Wharton School of Business, where he did his MBA and MA in International Studies with the Lauder Institute there. While he was there, he started pooltables.com, which is the largest retailer for pool tables in the country. He later went on to sell that, started his next venture down in Brazil, baby.com.br, raised over $40 million for that. It was Brazil's 2012 Startup of the Year. So Davis has been a serial entrepreneur, really focused in e-commerce, something that he loves, but he's also had a passion for giving back and doing more in the world. So that led him to his latest venture, and that's Cotopaxi. So he started that not quite 4 years ago was when it was inception, and when he started talking to investors for a seed round. We launched April of 2014, Davis and 5 others on the team. So a team of 6 starting, and now we're at 50 employees. Deseret News just named Cotopaxi the best company to work for here in Utah. A lot. Thanks to Davis. Yeah, we'll give a round of applause for that. But yeah, without further ado, Britton is going to start this fireside chat. So as you're listening, be sure to think of some questions. There will be a Q&A after, as well as we'll do a little raffle for some prizes down at the store, which is right down here. You guys can all go check it out after. But yeah, Britton and Davis, thank you.
Thanks, Durs.
Davis, thank you for having us out tonight. We really appreciate it. Audience, thank you for getting cozy in here. We appreciate having all of you here. Really, it's incredible the turnout we've had tonight. So Davis, have you always been an entrepreneur?
So just yesterday, I posted something on Instagram. I had this 12-year-old boy who knocked on my door and selling his lawn mowing services, which he knocked on the right door. And so he instantly was given a job, and he showed me he had just bought this little trailer. His dad, I guess, had like a little 4-wheeler, but he had to buy a trailer and a hitch for it. So he spent $600 of his own money to do this, and man, I was so proud of this kid. I took a picture of him and posted him on my Instagram account, and I was not that kid. I always worked. I always had from the time I was young, I worked, came from a large family, and I knew if I was going to go to college and all these things, I needed to save up money myself. And so I always enjoyed working and having a job and saving money, but I wasn't one of those kids that from the earliest days kind of knew what they were doing, which is good. I mean, I think it gives me hope for my own kids, because I have a daughter who's just turned, she's a teenager now, and I'm looking at her saying, man, I want her to be an entrepreneur, but she's not quite jumping into it the way I want her to. But it's like, I didn't know what I was doing either at that age. So the answer is no. I didn't always know.
So yeah. When did you guys, I guess, when did you catch that startup bug? Like, when did you decide this is the path?
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad, right when I started undergrad, I read this article, a newspaper article about a man named Steve Gibson. And Steve was this incredible entrepreneur, built a great business, and then he sold it. And he and his wife, he was probably in his 60s at this point, he and his wife moved to the Philippines. And I thought that was interesting, because like most people, when they go sell their business, they go to Hawaii or something, right? So he went to the Philippines with his wife, they moved there, and they started teaching poor Filipinos how to start their own businesses. And they had a 2-month program where people lived in residence for 2 months, 25 people at a time. And these people were graduating from this 2-month program, starting a business. Like, all of them had a business when they graduated. The success rate was unbelievable. And so I was so inspired by this guy. So I cut out the article in the newspaper, and I put it in the front cover of my binder, this clear-faced binder at school, and I carried it around for 3.5 years. And I saw it 10, 20 times a day. And at that point in my life, it didn't matter to me that he was an entrepreneur, that he'd been really successful. It was just that he'd found a way to use his talents to go do good and to help other people, which was something I was really passionate about, which maybe I can get into later, like why. But fast forward to the time I'm finishing school, I'm actually walking down the hallway at Brigham Young University, and there was a social impact conference on the Saturday, so I went to this conference, and in between some sessions, Steve Gibson is walking down the hallway, getting into an elevator, and I recognize him. So it was like, that is this man that I like know everything about. So I run down the hallway, I jump into the elevator, and he's trapped. He has to talk to me, and you know, this guy's multimillionaire. He's changed thousands of people's lives. I'm a nobody, and he's acting so flattered that I recognized him, and just the most humble person. And he asked me if I wanted to meet with him in a couple weeks in his office, which I of course said yes. And I put together a pitch where I was going to convince him to let me work for him. And at the end of my pitch, he just told me, he's like, Davis, I love how passionate you are about this, about doing good, but you don't want to work for me. He's like, what I see in you is that you would be a great entrepreneur. You need to go start your own business, and eventually, 10 or 20 years down the road, you can go find your own way of making an impact on the world. And he was right. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And so I left that meeting and I started looking at what I could do on my own. And so I started my first business with my cousin, and kind of went from there.
That's awesome. So first business, pooltables.com.
Yeah.
Why pool tables? Like you go from I wanna like change the world, do good. Let's sell some pool tables.
Yeah, it is funny. Well, the reason, I really didn't care what one thing, I remember when I was at BYU, I did a business minor, because I really was passionate about international studies. I wanted to major in that, but I also had this interest, I thought, in business, and so I took some classes as a minor. One of the classes was an entrepreneurship lecture series. So it was once a week. You show up for an hour and you get to hear someone really cool talking about how they built a business. There was a guy, I think it was an alarm sales company, and he'd done extremely well. And someone in the class asked him, hey, are you passionate about alarms? And he's just like, of course not. Who would ever be passionate about alarms? But he's like, but I'm passionate about my business, and I love my business because it's something that I'm building, that's my own. And he was totally right. And so from that moment, I kind of realized, what? I don't necessarily have to have a love for the business. I just need to find an opportunity, and I'll love whatever it is. And he was right. I loved that business. I loved that pool table business. It was such a great experience. Had some crazy experiences as a young entrepreneur, made plenty of mistakes. But my cousin and I did this for about 6.5 years, and we sold online primarily, and then we had our own physical retail stores that we kind of opened up around the US, and it ended up becoming the largest retailer of pool tables in the United States. It's a really small industry, so it wasn't really very impressive in actuality, but it was a great first time, base hit for a first time entrepreneur. And so I loved the experience, and it kind of gave me a taste for what it was like to be an entrepreneur. So
in your earliest days, you didn't have a ton of formal training on HR, management, any of those kind of things. How did you go about acquiring that knowledge in your first initial startup?
Yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. My very first hire, my first time full-time hire as an entrepreneur was the best man for my wedding, one of my best friends. And an awesome guy, one of my favorite people in the world. And I had to let him go. And I actually wouldn't have had the courage to do it, but my cousin was insisting. And he was right, because the role that we had hired him for was not the right role for him. Luckily, he's such a good guy, we're still friends, right? So that says a lot about him. But I made mistakes early on in hiring. I didn't understand how to hire a great team. I didn't understand how to build great culture. I was still figuring it out. And so, this Anders mentioned this, this award that we got, the best company to work for in Utah. For me, that is the highest honor we could have ever received. it wasn't even on our radar. It was like the biggest shock, but I'm so proud of that accomplishment, because that's what I built from the beginning. That was the focus of this brand. I had the idea when I was living in Brazil, running my last business, and when I put together a team of 5 other people that I believed I needed to go build this brand. We all flew out to Utah. Most people were living somewhere else. We met in a mountain cabin for a couple days, and we didn't talk about our go-to-market strategy. We didn't talk about product. All we talked about were our core values. We talked about the culture we wanted to build, the type of place that this needed to be, what it needed to stand for. And so to get this kind of recognition for me is just, it's really satisfying. So.
That's awesome. I think, I'm sure that's like one of the things you don't really think about as a young entrepreneur is, okay, where am I going? Most of the time, do I have enough cash to cover my inventory? I've got somebody returning a product. Am I going to be able to take this hit? So it's always an interesting thing to keep in mind from the start. So you grew pooltables.org, became the industry leader. I didn't realize that you had opened up retail locations in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm sure that was a whole nother beast outside of e-commerce.
Yeah.
What type of business model did you deploy with pooltables.org? Like how did it allow you to get started?
Yeah. So with this business, we actually started the business as, we called it Billiards Express. And within, 48 hours, we got a notification from someone that they were going to sue us because we had stolen their name. And it was like, as a kid, I had no idea. It's like, oh, you can't take someone else's name? That's how little I knew about business, right? So I was like, okay, someone else has that business already. They already own, Billiards Express. So we immediately, we changed the name to Billiard X. And pretty soon we realized that no one knew how to spell Billiard X, even my mom. And people would change it to Billiards, like plural, X, like EX. So Billiard Sex, it was like not the domain we wanted. And so pretty soon we're like, okay, we've made another mistake. And so we started looking at, okay, what would be a better name for this business? And it took a couple of years actually to get to get this name, to get the pooltables.com domain. And we had to be creative in how we got this domain, but we ended up getting this domain, and it proved to be, it was very expensive, but it proved to be valuable, and made a big impact on our business. And so we actually first started on eBay. That's how, I'd say, if you're a young entrepreneur today, you're probably using Kickstarter, you're using Indiegogo, or one of these crowdfunding platforms. Yeah. Back in the early 2000s, it was eBay, and so we put our first pool table up on eBay, and I'd Googled some factories in China, just pool table factory China, found some factories, got some pricing. It was that easy, and then we just made a listing and started. We wanted to see if someone would buy it. We knew what we needed to sell it for to make enough money to know if we had a business. And my cousin and I, we sat in my cousin's parents' basement, and we just watched this listing tick down. And we knew we had to sell for like $1,200 or $1,300 to make money, to make enough money where it was like, yeah, this could actually scale and be a real business. And like an hour left, it was like at $800. So we're just like, we're so disappointed. And as we're watching it, as it gets closer to ending, it starts skyrocketing, and it's going to like $1,100, $1,200, $1,300, and then it got to $1,584, I think was the number. And we were just we were jumping around this basement, hugging each other and high-fiving each other and hugging my aunt and uncle, and it was just we've figured out a business. If we can sell one, we can sell more. And so we flew out to China and started importing pool tables. So
that was your 0 to 1.
Yeah.
So how'd you go from 1 to 100? How did you finance your first purchases for inventory?
So we had no money. We were.
That's where most of us are when we start.
Yeah. So we were broke, and our parents were very middle class families. They didn't have really any money either, at least to give us. Yeah. And but we desperately, begged friends, family, got my grandma to give us $10,000 that we had to pay her back, of course, and anything we could do. Literally, those credit cards you get in the mail that say 18 months interest free. Yes, I use those. I had never had debt before in my life. Like even college, I paid for every semester. I barely paid for by working, and so it was a big deal for me. I did not want to go into debt, but I believed in this business we were building, and so eventually I was able. We started seeing traction with the business, and we did $1 million in sales our first 12 months, and half of that time I was working for someone else and kind of doing this on the side until I realized, hey, I should quit my job. I can make more working for myself. And so we did. We ended up convincing my parents and my in-laws to mortgage their homes to help us finance this business. So it was.
That was after you had traction, right?
We had a little bit of traction at that point. Obviously, I mean, they weren't.
At least something.
But honestly, I was terrified. Every day for 6.5 years, I had a pit in my stomach. I was so scared because if this business failed, it wasn't just a failure for me. Like I lost my parents and my in-laws' homes, and so it was incredibly stressful. I wouldn't do it again ever. Although I don't know that I think it was the right decision for us at the time. And a young entrepreneur, it's like if that's the only way you can get capital, then do it. But now that I know there are other options, venture capital and other things, I wouldn't go that route. It's just a lot more fun when you don't have that millstone around your neck. Yeah. So.
And you had an interesting model too, where you were actually selling the products before you were placing orders with the factory. Right?
Yeah. The great point. We were pre-selling product. We'd sell the pool table. We'd say 10-week lead time, and so we were using customers' money to help us finance the early growth. Pretty soon eBay shut that down. They were like, you can't do that, but it took them a while to figure it out. So we took advantage while we could.
And it's interesting because now you work with a business model that, you launch your products on crowdfunding campaigns.
Yes.
And so you started off, it's interesting. I mean, that's crowdfunding before there was crowdfunding, that pre-sale type model.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. It was interesting. That business, it was such fantastic learning. And this model that everyone's using today, a lot of these what are called digitally native vertical brands, which are brands that are born online. You can think of Warby Parker, the eyewear company, or Bonobos, which is that men's fashion brand. There's hundreds of others. Cotopaxi is one of these. It's a brand that's born online. These brands a lot of times start online and then they open up physical retail. And it's kind of a model that's really kind of around 2010, 2011, 2012. That's when the first brand started doing that. We'd been doing that with the pool table business for like 7 years. Like we had no idea that we'd like stumbled upon this model that was going to end up working for a lot of different brands.
Yeah. And how disruptive it was.
Yes, it was incredibly disruptive. It really was. So, and that goes to show, like, I was a young kid. I'm not even that smart. I had no business background. That's the great thing about entrepreneurship, right? It's like, if you have hustle and you're scrappy and you're creative, you can make something work.
Well,
so.
When we were talking before, you mentioned that when you were making the decision for pooltables.com, you basically said you picked a business that you knew you could do, and you could do it better than they were doing it.
Yeah.
How much weight do you think a beginning entrepreneur should put into that type of business rather than a big moonshot business right out the gate?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, as a first-time entrepreneur, I wasn't going to be able to go tackle. I wasn't going to be able to start Facebook. Maybe. I mean, Facebook was started the same year I started pool tables. That's how dumb I am, right? So it's like I should have thought of something bigger, but I knew it was digestible. It was something I knew I could do. It was very simple. It was like I can buy a pool table for X, I can sell it for Y. And I saw people doing it that just weren't, I didn't feel were doing it that well. And it was like, hey, I think I can do it better than these guys. And the model worked. The model was already proven. So there was a lot less risk than going and trying something completely new that no one had ever done. And so, I'm a believer in that. Cotopaxi is somewhat similar. I mean, we're not the first people to build outdoor gear. There's a lot of brands and a lot of great brands that have been built over the last 100 years. Many that are still around. But I did believe that we could do something different and unique, and so that's kind of a model I followed.
So I don't want to spend too much time. I love focusing on your earliest ventures because a lot of times that's the one where you overcame the most hurdles. That's the one where emotionally, like you said, you're walking around with a pit in your stomach, like with all the money on the line of the people that really care about you and you care about. So you moved on from pooltables.com. You decided to go get your MBA. You went to one of the top 5 schools in the nation. get to Wharton, got your MBA, and that opened up a ton of opportunities for you. At what point did you start thinking about that next idea? Like what drove your move to?
Yeah.
How did you transition from pool tables to baby stuff?
Yeah, so my cousin, Kimball Thomas, and I had built this pool table business together. And, we'd both talked about doing an MBA forever. From the time we were in college, undergrad, and it was something we dreamed about. But then when we were in the business, it was hard to pull away and go out and do an MBA for 2 years. And the cost is astronomical. I mean, my program was around $85,000 a year, just the tuition. So, there was a lot of questions around, hey, is this really the right thing to do? But we ended up deciding to do it. We decided to go back. We didn't want to be the pool table guys forever. And we also saw that the business that we got into was a really cool business. In fact, I don't even think I appreciated it as much as I should have, to be honest. But we just felt like we could do something bigger. We wanted to get stretched. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, I was talking to a young entrepreneur earlier, and he was mentioning he started his first business when he was 13, and he's 17 now. He's kind of itching to go do something new. And it's that's pretty normal for an entrepreneur to have this itch to go do something bigger or different. And I certainly felt that. And so, my cousin, we had kind of our dream schools. I'd always wanted to go to Wharton. They had a really cool program called the Lauder Institute, which was a dual degree, an MBA from the Wharton School and an MA in International Studies. I grew up internationally, moved abroad when I was 4 years old. And so I spent most of my life internationally, and so that program really resonated with me. My cousin had always wanted to go to Harvard Business School, and we were lucky. We both got into our dream schools, and so once we were in school, we were like, okay, let's do something again together. I mean, I will say there was a slight moment where I thought maybe I should go be a consultant and go get a real job. And I went to one recruiting session. It was just oh my gosh, I'm unemployable. So I better go find another business to start. So, and I would have been awful at consulting, I think. So, I basically, my cousin and I made a commitment to each other that we'd start exploring business ideas. We shared a Google Doc together, a spreadsheet that he was in Boston, I was in Philly. So we started making lists of ideas, and that first year in business school, we kind of committed to doing that. We went and spent the summer out in Silicon Valley together on Stanford campus, and we just went through these ideas. We had about 60 ideas that were pretty good, and then we took those 60 and cut them down to 4, and then we spent the bulk of the summer on those 4 ideas, and we put $500 to $1,000 behind each one just to kind of test them and see which ones got traction. And by the end of the summer, we'd identified a business that we believed would really work and could be big. And so the idea was going down to Brazil and launching a business in the baby space.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you saw that there was a huge discrepancy between the pricing structure for baby products here in the U.S. In Brazil, how did you make that discovery? What led to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I was doing the pool table business, I'd been connected with an entrepreneur named Mark Laurie. And Mark Laurie had started a business, I believe it was called 1-800-Diapers at that time. And it was a similar size to what I was doing at the pool table business. I felt like I was a peer with this guy. He'd gone to Wharton. And so, we started talking on the phone, I started learning about his business, and we started, really kind of sharing our own experiences. But the next time we talked on the phone was a year later. He'd doubled or tripled the size of his business. So he went from $10 or $20 million to $60 or $70 million. And it was dude, how did you do that? I'm
selling diapers, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the next time we talked to him, he was doing $120 million, then he was doing $200 million. So he had this massive business because everyone at some point is buying diapers, is buying baby clothes. Not everyone needs a pool table. And so pretty soon I realized, hey, I need to go pick a market that's very, very big. And when I was in business school coming up with these ideas, a few of my best friends in school were Brazilian. I'd grown up in Latin America, so just connected with these guys. We traveled a lot together. One of them I actually during business school, we went to 19 countries together.
Wow.
And so we had a really fun relationship. And one of his Brazilian friends was like, telling me how his wife was expecting a baby. I knew his wife. They were this really great couple. And I was telling him, it was their first baby, I was telling him how awesome it was to be a dad. I had 2 daughters at the time, and I was just saying, it is the best, most fulfilling thing ever. You're going to love it. And we just started talking about being a dad, and he was saying how he was buying all these baby products in the US, and that he was going to be bringing them back to Brazil when he finished school. And it was like, does not compute. Like, why would you do that? That seems like such a hassle. Why don't you just buy the stuff down there? And he's like, no, everything in Brazil is like 2 or 3 times more expensive and impossible to find. Half the stuff that you want to buy here isn't even available there.
Toys, clothes,
yes,
baby
yeah,
related.
Exactly. So all of a sudden it was just like, oh, this is so easy. Like, I know this model. Like, I watched Mark Laurie build this business that became diapers.com, and was this massive business. And I was like, I know Latin America. I could go build this business.
So clone it and transplant it.
Exactly, and tropicalize it. Basically, convert it into a business that would work in Brazil. And while I was fundraising we ran with this business. As I was fundraising, diapers.com sold to Amazon for $500 million. So it was just like, it was luck. It was just really lucky. We identified a business that was really interesting. We had just come off a success of our own. So investors loved it. It was like, hey, 2 guys that are going to great business schools that had an early success with a small business, and have a big vision for going down to Brazil, and they're using a model that we already know works. And so then, the trick was we had to pitch investors. We'd never pitched a VC before. I was terrified, honestly. I was so scared to talk to a VC. And like, the first pitch that we made, this guy like annihilated us. He like totally destroyed us in this meeting. And so, it was pretty nerve-wracking to go through that experience. But the business ended up working.
So when you were going to pitch, you had your experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had a pitch deck that you'd worked really hard on, and you had a name at that point, right? We
had a name, but not the real name. So again, we made a mistake with naming our business to start off. So, we were pitching this VC. This guy's in New York, and he's invested in Brazil a ton. And this guy is like one of the best known investors in Latin America. So we were like super nervous to talk to him. We get into his office, and as we're sitting in his office waiting to talk to him, he's in this fishbowl kind of conference room. It's glass. And we can see him in there, and he is on the phone screaming at somebody on the phone. And it's so loud that like we could hear everything he's saying. And we were just like, we were terrified. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the guy we're going to talk to. And so he invites us in the room finally, and we're pitching him. And the first thing we have up on the slide deck is the name of the company. And we named it fraldas.com. For anyone that speaks Portuguese, fraldas means diapers. And he was like, why did you name it fraldas.com? And we're like, well, you may not realize, but fraldas means diapers. He's like, I know that. And I was like, hey. And he's like, well, why did you do that? And I was like, well, Mark Laurie is this friend of ours, and like he built this great business, and we thought that name would work in Brazil, and it was available, and then he's like, oh, that's like the dumbest thing, because everything in Brazil is .com.br. Nothing's .com. And we're like, oh yeah, of course. Like, this is just a placeholder. We didn't tell them that we just spent like $6,000 buying the domain. So like we're like looking at each other like sick to our stomachs, like going, oh my gosh, we are the biggest fools. And so we go on, like in the middle of our pitch, he literally answers the phone and starts like yelling at somebody else on the phone in the middle of our pitch. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is not going well. So we finished like an hour and a half later, we finished this pitch and like literally got destroyed for the entire hour and a half. We get down on the streets of New York, we're like kind of bummed, and we're talking, and all of a sudden we look down our phones, he sent us a message and he's like, I'm in. I want to put $1 million into the business. And it's like, what? It's like, this is insane. Like, and so dude, we had nothing. We didn't even have a name yet, So we're like high-fiving each other, hugging each other, just like the basement after selling the first pool table, same thing in the streets of New York. So we go and we sit down and we're like, okay, let's go have dinner. Let's like celebrate, and we're so happy. And my cousin asked me, he's like, dude, if he called you on the phone right now, would you want to answer? I was like, no. Like, no, I wouldn't want to answer. I was like, would you? And he's like, no way. So it's like, we know what he's like on the phone. So right then we just said, you know what? Let's not take his money. Like, if that's how we feel about him, he's not the right investor for us. So it was scary, but like, we're just like, look, this guy validated that we had something that was worth, we had something special. And so we started looking at domains. We found this great domain called baby.com.br. Everyone in Brazil knows the word baby. Everyone knows how to spell it. Justin Bieber sings about baby all the time. So like half the songs in Brazil say the word baby. So like everyone knows it, and it's this English word that like Brazilians, they love English words. They love like they love the United States. So it was like this. It was this perfect name. So all we had to do is convince the guy that owned it to sell it to us. And this guy turns out he's Brazilian. He doesn't speak English. I don't really speak Portuguese. I speak Spanish. And but I'd taken a Portuguese class in college, so I knew some basics, and we were communicating. Not very efficiently, but we were communicating, and he goes on to tell me how he'd bought 70 domains in 1999. And I was like, man, brilliant. This guy, good move. And I was like, how many have you sold to date? Guess how many he'd sold? Zero. None. So I was like, okay, this is bad. Because clearly he has no incentive to sell ever. And he made it very clear he didn't really care if we bought it or not. He's like, I get offers all the time. I'm just going to sit on this domain. Brazil's so hot. It's going to be worth a lot of money. So you can either have two strategies when you're buying a domain. You can either go the route of like, hey, I'm a poor college student. Like, I'm broke. I have no money. But this is what I can offer. Or you can go the route of like, this is the best offer you're ever going to get, and this is why. Like, I'm the most qualified buyer you're ever going to have. So if you don't sell to me, we're going to buy from someone else, and you're going to be sad because no one else is going to buy it for as much as we'd pay. And that's the route we had to go, because this guy was not going to go the other route, right? So we asked him, hey, give us a range of what this domain is worth to you, what you would have to sell it for. And at the same time, we told him, like, we're looking at some other domains as well, which kind of was true, but kind of wasn't true, because there was no other domain that we were really interested in. And he said, look, I would have to sell for like $500,000 to $1 million. And it was just like, what? Like, this is a domain name. It's like, there's not even a business behind it. And but we'd kind of done the math ourselves, and based on the value that we'd seen from pooltables.com, we're like, this is worth something. So we actually, we decided that it was probably worth around $400,000, maybe more. So we came back to him with a full price offer, and we said, we will give you it was a little over $500,000 for this domain. And, but we want you to finance it for us. So we will, we'll pay you, but we want to pay you over 4 years. We'll pay you every month. If we ever make a late payment or we ever miss a payment, you can keep the domain's yours, and you can keep all the money we've given you. And this is actually the same model that we'd use to buy pooltables.com. So we thought this is going to work. This guy came back to us and he said, I accept your offer, $500,000 plus for this domain. You can pay me over 4 years, but at the end of the 4 years, you need to give me $1 million, or you can give me 10% of your revenues for 10 years. And it's just like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. So, oh man, I was like beating my head against the wall. I mean, this had taken me like 2 months to get here, right? So I was so frustrated at this point. And so, but I was taking this negotiations class at Wharton from this amazing professor, and one of the things was like to remove all emotion, to not get emotional, and to try to put yourself in their shoes. So I came back to him and said, help me understand where you're coming from, because this is totally different than what you told me before. And he said, well, the thing is, you're asking to pay over 4 years, and you don't understand Brazil. Like, there's currency risk, there's economic risk, there's, if you had the domain, it might take me 10 years in court to get the domain back. There's like all sorts of risks that you don't understand. And so I was like, okay, so you're saying if I gave you $500,000 today, you would let me buy the domain? And he said, yes, I would do it. If you gave me $500,000 today, I would sell it to you. So I said, okay, you've got a deal. That's what we'll do it. But first, we're gonna wire you $5,000, and you have to give us 90 days. And in 90 days, we'll give you the balance payment. And if we don't give you the balance payment, then you keep the $5,000. But in the meantime, put up our logo on the site that says baby.com.br coming soon. And so he did it, and we had 90 days to go sell the tar out of this business to VCs. And on the 90th day, we closed a round. So we raised $4.3 million from VCs for this business that was nothing more than a PowerPoint presentation and a domain that we hadn't paid for yet. And so, but what I love about this story is that I didn't speak Portuguese. Hadn't lived in Brazil. We hadn't been to Brazil. Never, ever. But we had a vision, and we were creative in how we were able to get this domain. And so that's what entrepreneurship is all about. It's like doing it as much as you can with nothing. You have nothing, and you have to get really creative about how to use the resources that you have to build something. And so yeah, it was a really fun experience.
So you did really well with the company, turned around and sold it. Sold it in 2013? Yeah, 2013. And you decided to start your next business, and that's essentially when Cotopaxi started brewing.
Yeah, so it's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, to not have to get into all the details. I mean, we had baby.com.br, and we launched another business called ginda.com.br, which meant godmother in Portuguese, and slightly different models, but both in the baby space, and they both grew very quickly. The Ginda business actually started outpacing the growth of baby, even though we launched it later. And Brazil started coming. We started seeing that Brazil was changing, and it was super hot, and then it was kind of okay, and we were nervous. And so my cousin and I had to make a decision about what we were going to do. Were we going to try to run both businesses, or would it be better to sell one and focus on the other? And that's what we decided to do. So we sold baby.com.br, and we focused everything on ginda.com.br. And so my cousin is in Brazil still running this business, a great business that he's been able to do a phenomenal job on. But at the end of 2013, I really was starting to reflect on what I wanted to do. And I grew up in the developing world, and some of my earliest memories as a child were seeing other 3 or 4-year-old kids my age that were living with nothing. They literally had no clothes on the sides of the street. And as a kid, it was shocking to me. And those very earliest ages, I started realizing that I was lucky. I didn't do anything to deserve it. I wasn't smarter than these kids. I was just lucky. And I really started feeling and developing a real deep sense of empathy for others. It was the greatest blessing that I think my parents could have ever given me. And living in Brazil was one of those moments that really sparked something inside of me. And so I knew I needed to find a way to have an impact. And so I explored a number of different thoughts around, what if I went and started a nonprofit? Or what if how could I go do good somehow in the world? And ultimately I decided the best way I could do good is by building a business. That's what I knew how to do, and I believed that I could build a business that could inspire people to go do good with me. And I resigned from my role as co-CEO of the business and moved down, moved here to Utah, and started trying to build this new business.
That's awesome. So you move here, you've got a pretty clear vision of what you want to accomplish. How did you decide on a business model that would be sustainable to make the social impact that you wanted to see happen? So what was your key inspiration for your business model?
Yeah. So from the time I talked to Steve Gibson, that entrepreneur that really inspired me, that encouraged me to become an entrepreneur in the first place, I started exploring ways to integrate doing good and business. Before I started the pool table business, I had a couple great failures where I dabbled in an idea to see if it would work. And two of those ideas had a social mission kind of attached to the business. And when they failed, it was like, man, this is just so hard. I don't even know how to start a business. So I kind of realized, I just need to focus on learning how to be an entrepreneur, and then I'll figure out the doing good piece later. And so I kind of saw like a vision of being able to somehow integrate those, but I didn't know how. And then I saw brands like Tom's Shoes and Warby Parker and a bunch of other great companies that had figured out a way to integrate those two models. And so that's when I started realizing, hey, there is a way to do this, and it's a way that actually sustainably can help the business and that can sustainably do good at the same time. And so that's how I kind of came on the idea of doing that.
So you found your passion again. What was it like trying to start another company? Your third real large company, getting into it. It's daunting, right?
Yeah. To be totally honest, when I was in Brazil, there was a moment where I started thinking about starting something new, and it was so overwhelming. I just didn't want to do it. The thought of being back in the trenches again and building something from scratch was just like, I don't know if I have it in me to do it. I don't know how many entrepreneurs there are in this room, but I suspect many of you know what I'm talking about. It can take everything out of you. I mean, and you love it. You love every minute of it, but it is draining and it is hard. And but when I had the idea for Cotopaxi, and I had this mission of doing good and building a brand that could change lives, I believe that we can eradicate extreme poverty in our lifetimes. 200 years ago in 1820, 94% of the world lived in poverty. When I was born in 1978, 50% of the world lived in extreme poverty. And last year, for the first time in human history, 9% of the world, less than 10% of the world, lived in extreme poverty. It is changing. It is remarkable what has happened over the last 200 years. And we can make a final push, and we can help eradicate extreme poverty. And so when I realized that I had this idea that could do that, all those feelings that I had, the feelings of like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, those went away. And I was 100% in. And it didn't mean I wasn't scared. I was scared. I was scared of failure. I felt like I'd built two businesses that had succeeded, and I didn't know what people would think of me if I failed after that. I'd built two businesses with my cousin. It was like, what if I fail on my own and people just say, oh, the only reason Davis succeeded was because of that. He was riding the coattails. Yeah. So, there were real fears that I had, and the fears that I had to overcome, and fears that I still have. I mean, I think a lot of people have imposter syndrome, where it's like they're going to figure out at some point that I'm not that smart, or I'm not that good, or I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just I've been lucky, and so there's certainly those feelings that I still have, but I really believed in this. I believed in this mission. I believed if I had to do it, I didn't have a choice, and I just needed to convince other people to believe in me and believe in this idea.
And you did. You started off just convincing everybody to join your team before you went and raised money, right?
Yeah.
That was an interesting experience.
Yeah. So the one thing I'd learned in the 10 years I'd spent building a couple businesses was that team mattered more than anything, and building the right team and the right culture around the team was everything. And so I started piecing together the key roles that I needed to go build this business. And I think the temptation as an entrepreneur is to go hire your best friend, which I made that mistake before.
It's the easiest one, right?
It's the easiest thing, is you're like, hey, I want to start this with someone I like, and I want to tell someone about it. And the person I tell about it is my best friend or my best friends, and they're naturally going to be the people you're like, hey, why don't you come work for me? And so I didn't want to do that. So I really just kind of said, okay, I need to go hire the best people in the world to go solve these problems. And so I reached out to a couple of people that I did know, and then I reached out to people I didn't even know. I went on LinkedIn and searched for the best product designers on the planet, people that had built award-winning gear, and I just sent them a LinkedIn message and just said, I'd love to talk to you. I'm going to go build a business that's going to change the world, and I want to tell you about it. And these people responded to me. I jumped on a Skype call with them from Brazil and sold them on the vision of what I wanted to build, and offered a couple of them an opportunity to come work with me. And they didn't get paid or anything. CJ Whitaker, he quit his job at Gregory. He'd worked at Black Diamond and Gregory for a lot of years, and he quit his job, worked for nothing. And the deal was, once we raised venture capital, people can get paid. Until then, no one gets paid.
Awesome.
Yeah, so, they were kind of taking a bet on me, and luckily it ended up paying off.
Ended up paying off big time. You guys were able to raise the capital you needed and to launch an incredible brand. We're starting to kind of get low on time tonight, so I really want to take a moment to focus on how you've grown Cotopaxi, not just from in your previous endeavors. You built an e-commerce brand. In this one, you've built a social community, a community of people that not only connects online, but what I think is really unique to Cotopaxi is that you guys connect in person through your Questables. Mm-hmm. What was the inspiration for that, and how has it impacted your business operations?
Yeah. How much time do we have, just so I know how to time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
One thing I knew we had to do is connect with consumers in a different way than had ever been done before. We were competing in a space with a lot of great brands, but we were targeting millennials, and millennials value experiences more than things. We couldn't just try to sell them more stuff or better stuff, because everyone's competing on these technical features. That was a losing game. So I came up with an idea of creating an experience where people could go live the brand, where they could go live our values of giving back, of service to others, of spending time adventuring in the outdoors with people we care about and love. And so we created this 24-hour venture race, called it the Questival. And the day we turned on our website, we had this first Questival, and we had several thousand people show up to this event. Everyone had paid to participate. They got one of our backpacks, and they went and spent several, 24 hours with all their friends, out in the outdoors, surviving by eating a worm and getting points, or, riding, on their mountain bikes to get points, or summiting some peak, or volunteering at a soup kitchen, or we did a flash mob. We went and picked up garbage on a trail, the Jordan River Trail, going and getting people out in the community, doing good, serving others. And, that event, we ended up having 30,000 social media posts about our brand the day of our launch. And it was just a magical way to help people understand what we stood for. And this year we're doing 60 or 70 Questivals around the US and Canada. The events are profitable, so it's a way we can go scale the brand at no cost to us. And so it's a really unique way of building this company. And but I think more important than the Questival than anything is really the concept that people understand that our business represents something bigger than us. This isn't about selling gear. This isn't about making money. This is truly about changing lives. And we have integrated that into everything that we do. Our slogan, Gear for Good. If you order something on our website, you get a handwritten thank you card that's written by a refugee here in Salt Lake City. These are refugees that have arrived here in the last 6 months. They're learning the language. They have nothing. And we help them get their first job. We help teach them basic job skills, how to do a job interview, how to create a resume. I'll teach them about leadership. Our CFO will teach them about budgeting. And then they can make money by writing these thank you cards. They write them in their own language, and then they sign their name. They put what country they're from and what language is their native language. And when you get one of these cards, it means something. We use products. One of our best-selling jackets is a jacket that's the insulation inside the jacket, instead of using down or synthetic insulation, some kind of plastic, we use llama wool. And Bolivia is one of these places I lived. We're working with these communities that make about $200 a year. They live in extreme poverty. And this year we're ordering hundreds of thousands of pounds of llama wool from these communities. And we're able to make an impact through our business. And when people see that and they feel that and they understand the authenticity behind the mission, they want to be part of it. And I think being a mission-driven brand is so fun, because you come to work every day and it's not about you. And the team that we have, they're not here because it's a job. They're not here because it's a career that they're going to work up on. They're going to climb the ladder. They're here because it's a calling. For us, this is a calling. That's why we're here. We're here to make the world better. We're here to do everything that we can as a brand to inspire people to go do good with us. And that's what drives me every single day to come to work. And it's just the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are interested in starting their own social endeavor, whether that's maybe they're considering starting an NGO, maybe they're considering trying to go and do something in another country. What advice would you have for them based off your experience?
You're talking about specifically doing good?
Yeah, about doing good. If they want to do good, what's the path that's going to help them to maximize that impact? So
my first advice is to just find something you're passionate about, and then go out and help somebody. And when you can put a face to those feelings of helping someone and serving somebody, that person will be in your mind for the rest of your life. I could name a dozen people right now, people that have changed my life, because as I went to go serve them, they served me. And I've gotten more from them than I could have ever given them. And those people, those faces, those names, those are the people that drive me every single day. And so if that's something you're thinking you want to go do, go help an individual, just one person. Get to know them, get to know their story, and give them everything you have. And as you do that, you're going to find a change in yourself, and that it's going to drive you your entire life to go do more and to get that feeling. It's an addiction. You want that feeling more, and so that would be my advice. And you can do that in your community. You don't have to travel to Africa or to Latin America. Go do it. You can do it right here.
So true.
Yeah.
Start where you are, and learn how to do it, and scale it out.
Yeah.
What you can do. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Davis.
Thank you.
Let's hear a big round of applause for Davis.
Thank you.